I'm Tony Lockwood, founder of Thompson Wright Partners, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest episode of Inside Track, where I discuss business transformation journeys with leading figures in industry. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Linzi Parry. Linzi has 25 years experience of delivering transformation in organisations of all sizes across many sectors. You always get a sense that a podcast will be a great podcast because the conversation just flowed, and that's definitely the case on this one. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Let me now introduce you to Linzi.
Okay. Well, thanks, Linzi. Thanks for agreeing to join us today. Like me, you've got. I think you state that you've got over 25 years experience of delivering change and transformation across multiple sectors, including retail, logistics, not-for-profits, etc. So just, it'd be good just to get a brief overview, brief summary of your career to date and how you transitioned into transformation in the first place.
Nice to be here, Tony. Thanks very much for the opportunity. My background really is, as you say, in kind of leading and designing and delivering large-scale strategic change programs, I suppose you'd call it, and very much a hands-on kind of person and very much hands-on role, even if I sort of, with a title that suggests otherwise. And it comes from a background, in my early days of management consulting, people like EY, and then through retail, there were lots of transformation programs, kind of often, I suppose, from three main categories. Someone creating a new service, kind of prompted by that. So it might be introducing a new product range in retail or a new channel to market. And that was very prevalent for kind of 10 or 15 years of my career. When even, more recently than that, retailers were focusing on kind of complementary online offerings. So that became a new form of, trying to transform, trying to introduce something new, and responding to kind of the conditions of the day, looking to exploit the new opportunities. I think the second one, in terms of where the transformation came from, was, a major shift in operating model, or a major shift in the focus of the business. So that might have been supply chain and logistics, warehouse automation. That was a huge scale project that I worked on. And I think that was a trend for a while as well. And then, I suppose that's about building future capability and new options. And then some of my programs as well came from post-acquisition integration and mergers. So delivering the benefits from exploiting the offer of one organization in a new market, or merging two retailers, or getting the benefits from different sectors, applying across the different customer segments and combining strengths and all of that sort of stuff. So quite different in terms of where the transformation programs came from. But I think that kind of, my point for that would be that I'm not sure that they were genuinely transformation.
Right.
I think that the nature of them was sometimes maybe in the mergers and acquisitions looking to take the business in a slightly different direction. But in the main, it was the same direction, but more. So I'm not sure I'd necessarily call them transformation. But of course, we all know that titles change, don't they, over time. And 10 or 15 years ago, change management probably wasn't that well thought of as a discipline separate to project management. So
no, absolutely. Yeah. So which leads us on to another question, I suppose, or a related question, around your definition of transformation. How would you define transformation these days?
Well, I think there's a bit of a history to it. Because I think, I don't know for definite, but I do believe that it probably came originally into my vocabulary a few years ago when we were thinking about digital transformation. And I think the latest sort of buzzwords are around agile transformation. And I wonder whether the next generation of it will be around sustainability. And I think that's gathering pace, and that will be yet another transformation. But for me, the truest sense of the word, that I think is probably overused, but the truest sense of it is, if you've got an agenda for transformation, you've got to be transforming into something new. The caterpillar to butterfly is kind of a very overused example, but I think it is about pursuing a fundamentally different operating model or way of working whether that's a reaction to market opportunity or whether it's a genuine shift in focus and using your strengths and knowledge in a different way, kind of doesn't matter, but it's to be a genuine pivot, I believe. So I think there's still merit in using the word transformation, because it kind of promotes the need for a different mindset or a way of looking at the future, but I'm not necessarily sure that it applies to all of the programs that I would have worked on with that title in the past.
No, I agree, and I think we ask that question quite a lot on these podcasts, and I think the general consensus is exactly what you just said. It's about taking an organisation from one state to another state, and those two states being not completely different, but fundamentally different.
Yes.
But I think it is getting to become an overused term, and just general business improvement type of activities now are being called transformation. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or a good thing, I'm not too sure. And I think, you know, the point you just raised around it being a mindset and getting people to understand that actually we have to move forward and we have to transition from one place to another. It's probably not a bad thing, really.
I think, in fact, I wonder whether transformation is transforming in a way, because kind of back to the point of history, I think where we are with it now, digital transformation kind of started, you know, to become even integrated with day-to-day operations for organisation a few years ago. It was no longer a department on the side, and no longer a load of specialists with their own budget, you know, kind of trying to do a bit of experiment at the side of an organisation. I think now employees are expected to have, you know, digital options in their mind, I suppose, when they're making decisions and they're reviewing what might be next. And I think the same will happen with agility and the need to be kind of good at change in every role at every level in the organisation. And, you know, change can't continue to be the domain of a single team, just like digital couldn't be that. And you know, it used to be wrapped around discrete initiative change. And I think now there's too much change and the pace is too fast, and the consequences of not being able to keep up are, you know, sort of too great for organisations, I guess, as we've sort of seen quite sadly in 2020.
No, I was going to say, it's if we've ever had an experience of how change can be transformative and how it impacts everybody in the organisation, and in reality, everybody in the organisation needs to be involved. It's what's happened over the last 12 months, isn't it?
Yeah. It's exactly that. And I think hindsight lets us see that sort of pattern, doesn't it? Of, you know, there's something new and it's on the side. We explore, we experiment, we break some new ground, and then we kind of look to integrate it as a core competency across the organisation. And, you know, and that kind of repeats itself. And maybe that's what we're saying now with things like agility and the whole change. You know, last year, people are used to it now. They might not have liked it at first, but, you know, and whether they've engaged with it well or not, they've certainly, you know, built a bit of experience for themselves into what it actually feels like to be involved in a massive change, to sort of be expected to react in the moment, and that's all agility is. So yeah, maybe we are on the same path as the digital transformation now, and people are naturally accepting change and dealing with it more efficiently than they were before.
It will be interesting the next 12 months, I think, just to see how people react, because in my opinion it's not going to slow down. So those people that have been maybe thinking, well, haven't we done really well to keep afloat over the last 12 months, and didn't we do loads and loads of change? Well, that's just going to happen and continue to happen, and probably at a faster pace. So you know, you haven't got time to sit back and reflect on the glory, really, and that'll be an interesting challenge for lots of people, I think.
It will, and it's something that I'm fascinated by, is that organisational agility and how we support organisations to kind of get started with that and recognise what they're doing, and recognise the skill that they've got in doing that, and kind of encouraging a culture which makes the most of that. Makes the most of that new capability that they've got. So sort of shifting behaviours and then mindset and ultimately the culture in a way that will unblock the organisation. So you're reducing the impact of things like siloed working and maybe the outdated hierarchies that we've got and the general noise that's been holding the organisation back for years. Maybe, just seeing that we are more agile as organisations now and building on that as a strength and playing to that as a strength, will get us to break some good ground. I think organisations will need support. So there's hope for us change managers yet. I don't think we're out of a job yet.
Absolutely. And I think it's also about making sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time. Yeah. And we all provide an impact into the change agenda at different stages, depending upon our energies and where we are in terms of our core skill sets and our the kind of areas that we want to get involved in, where we can deliver maximum impact. And I've been doing a bit of work with GC Index, which is a tool that really identifies sort of 5 types of people in terms of the impact that they deliver to change or transformation, or generally in terms of business. And the fibre, the game changer, so the person that, or the people that come up with the ideas, and very much sort of like as I say, coming up with ideas, innovative. And then you've got what they call the strategist, which are the people that take those ideas and try to make sense of them and start to put a plan together around what it means to get that into the organisation and how it all fits together. Yeah. And then you've got the implementers, I suppose what we would classify the traditional sort of project management type of skill sets that are there to get it in place. And then you've got the polishers, which is, again, what my terminology would be the business improvement, continual improvement type of person, the lean type of individual that are constantly looking to improve what's there to make it work as effectively as possible. And then in the middle, you've got the playmaker, who are the people that, I suppose, bring people along on the journey and coerce and have an aptitude across all 4 areas, but really deliver through other people. And it's a fascinating tool and so insightful in taking organisations through change, because it helps you to get the right people in the right place at the right time in that transformation journey.
It does sound fascinating, and I think that it's that combination of people that and getting them to work together, and bringing their individual strengths to the problem solving and to the journey, I think is key, and it's something that's definitely promoted in terms of what I would call agility. And what agility would mean to me would be to really make the most of the strengths of individuals. And you mentioned earlier energies, and where we get our energy from is really important, because if we're putting square pegs into round holes, that's going to drain the organisation hugely. So playing to the strengths of the individuals, really, it does all sorts of things. It's a massive boost in terms of engagement. It's a massive boost in terms of purpose, and there's so much research that's gone on in recent years on how we react to change and how we benefit from playing to our strengths. That those sorts of things are, I think, no longer elements that leaders can ignore. I think they have to be considering a much broader spectrum of characteristics when they're putting a change team together, or when they're considering any form of large scale change, even if that large scale change is starting with some small steps. You start to really take into account a much broader set of I guess it is characteristics, a much broader set of characteristics that will help make that team as successful as it can possibly be. And so playing to those to those polishers, to those playmakers, to those ideas people, and getting their natural energy would be something that I would really encourage. And sometimes it is about asking the leaders to take a much broader view and a much bigger role in the change than perhaps they've done in the past.
And I think it's the key to the index in particular is understanding where the individuals are within that spectrum, because the natural position of a strategist will always be to challenge and question. So if we've gone through the process, or if we've gone through and starting to implement, they will always try to pull people back. So let's go and check whether or not we're doing the right thing, and are we doing it in the right way, and almost going back to square one. And I'm sure you've been in, I certainly have. I've been in lots of programs.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
it's like, we made that decision 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think you do have to come back to decisions. I wouldn't follow them blindly forever. I do think that that's a real skill, knowing when to make a decision and then revisit it.
Yeah.
And the art of decision making with the right people in the room and getting the buy-in to that decision will be the thing that gives you the speed and the momentum that you need, rather than that stop-start journey. And we've used some of the work we've done. We've used a tool called Strength Scope, which I just wonder whether would complement your index really well, in that it pulls out the natural strengths in the individuals. It helps them to play to those strengths and not worry about the ones that are not at the top of the list. But if you combine that with your index, I think what you'd get is some incredibly energized people, and therefore some results coming out of the other end of that, which will be far in excess of the, if you like, the stated benefits. I think what you get are byproducts when you go with something like that. Absolutely, we want to hit milestone X, and these are the changes we're looking to create. But actually, put your strongest team on, play into their strengths, knowing what each other's strengths are as well. Then you will definitely get byproducts from that. There'll be other ideas, there'll be other change, there'll be other things that we could just slot in. There'll be a lot about, what about if? A bit more experimentation, which, to be honest, we could all do with.
No, absolutely. And I think one thing you've just touched on, those about the team, and it's the strongest team. It's not necessarily the strongest individuals. It's the team that matter. And I use a sporting analogy all the time. A team of superstars very rarely win things. It's the team itself that will determine success, and the people within that team understanding what their role is and how they contribute and how they help each other. It's interesting. A couple of weeks back, or a couple of pods back, with Chris, he was in the Special Forces, and we were talking about how you build that teamwork within Special Forces, and I remember he was talking about my role is to look after the person to my left and look after the person to my right, because if I do that, I know they're doing exactly the same to me. So that's the safest point I can be if I'm looking after them. And it's that sort of teamwork, isn't it, that really will make the difference.
It is. And it's fascinating as well, because I think that what we don't do often enough, I wonder, Tony, is do we look at the organisation in that way? We might look at individual teams, but do we then scale that up and look at the organisation as, a collection of parts, a collection not just of individuals, but of functions and how they work together? And do we ever take that truly kind of holistic mindset when we're trying to solve change? Because just as we've been saying, if you've got a strong team, know who's got their back, they know each other's strengths, they know that they're working well together and they're meshing well together, then the sum of that is going to be greater. When we look at organizations, sometimes, we're looking at operating model, we might look at the hierarchy and the org structure, or we might pursue the culture. Or one week, the flavor of the month is continuous improvement on process. And then the next time it's, oh, we need a leadership development program. And unless we look at the whole thing,
they're just tactics, aren't they?
They are. And I think that's sort of what we've been talking about from a team's perspective. I think needs to scale up.
Yeah.
And one of my big bugbears often is an organisation that doesn't necessarily understand what they're asking in terms of a big change. So are they really considering, you know, we all talk about vision and what's your vision and why you're trying to get there and what are you trying to get out of it? But have you got a really watertight argument for it? And do you know with real operational clarity what the new world looks like and what does that mean for you and your team? And I think that there is a missing link in getting leaders to consider the whole of the organization, almost like a systems thinking approach. And, you know, if we get it at team level and we can see the difference at team level, why not think about that from an organizational level? Think about all the moving parts, the connections and joining those dots between customers and employees and the organization itself and its capability and its OD and its leadership.
It's understanding that end-to-end element, isn't it? It's you know, we work a lot of times on processes and stuff, and we always talk about we need to look at the end-to-end process, because if you play around with something in the middle or you play around with one function, that function or that activity will have a knock-on effect with everything else. And if you don't consider the end-to-end element, you've no idea what the impact's going to be, because you might make one change here that has a knock-on effect 3 or 4 steps down the way and you've not considered it. There's a project I got involved with years ago, and it was a supply chain program, and they were looking at new technology. It was a platform change. It was looking at the, you know, across Europe platform change. But when they was doing the specification, they really specified it for the UK operation, believing in retrospect incorrectly that all the other European operations were operating the system in exactly the same way. And as we all know, adaptations happen, processes change, and there was a massive, it was a significant risk to one of their major customer contracts, because they hadn't considered that at a more of a holistic perspective. And it was a major showstopper, as you can imagine.
And I'm not suggesting that it's easy, I think, for leaders to take that perspective, but I do think that leadership roles have moved on. You know, sponsoring change has moved on. You can't be hands off anymore. You have to be in there. You have to understand what's going on. And in doing that, you know, especially leaders have got, you know, a broader span when it comes to looking at the organization. If we can get them just to take that level down and really understand and really challenge, you know, what does this mean for all the different parts of the organization, then I think their ability to kind of, I suppose, clear out the distraction and keep the change on track and to learn from any glitches that come along, you know, the value that they could add would be so significantly more than potentially some sponsors of change are adding at the moment. And that would definitely speed things up.
It's just that stepping back, isn't it? And before you sign everything off, just step back and ask probably 3 or 4 big questions. And if you can answer them, great. And if you can't, just do a little bit more work before you start running down this path. But all too often, what I find is that the process of getting things signed off takes too long, and when the approval comes through, there's not a delayed approval comes through. There's not the necessary change to the deadlines, so you're always running behind schedule. So it's all systems going. Let's just get on to the delivering, because we've got to catch up. And that is always a recipe for disaster.
It is. I think it's that, you know, diving into the delivery too quickly It's that old adage, isn't it? Measure twice, cut once.
Yes.
And the more you do that in advance, you know, and I guess coach and persuade the leadership team to zoom in and zoom out appropriately at appropriate times along that journey. That's the thing that's really going to make a difference between your change program that works and other change programs that get shelved. And then they get shelved for all kinds of reasons, you know, because the business can't maybe afford to go any further. Sometimes it's about it not being able to sort of sustain that level of change. People get exhausted by it, or even, you know, it becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I think the more hands-on the leaders are, and the more support the leaders themselves have to engage at the right way in the right time, notwithstanding sort of how pushed for time they are, I think the more successful the change will be, and the more engaging it will be for the individuals that are sort of tasked with delivering it.
I agree, and it'll be very much embedded into the overall vision and the overall the overall vision for the business, and that big picture, and by keeping hold of that and making sure and reflecting on whether or not we're moving towards that or moving against it, is always a good barometer as you go through the process, just to see whether you're on the right path.
And one of the things I've done in the past is literally look at, you know, you look at the target of the change. What are you trying to change? What are your first set of things that you're going to change? And if you look at it from 4 different perspectives, and you, if you like, you know, see how many things you're trying to change in terms of individual strengths or individual capabilities that you've got in the organization, see how much on your list is process change or tech change or if you like, capability change, and then how much are you changing the organization in terms of its structure, of how value flows through, or how decisions get made, and then finally, how much are you actually changing anything to do with the cultural landscape around comms or relationships or well-being even. And actually, if all of your effort is going into the process side of it and not the other 3, then you're probably going to come unstuck. So it, you know, sometimes is quite a good, you know, sort of check and balance to say, you know, out of the 50 things that are on our list, I guess in years gone by, we've done a heat map, but we're talking about heat map at organizational level here, just to balance whether we're spending too much of our energy and our budget on process, when actually we need to compensate and make sure that we're looking at the structure of the organization, the culture, and the individual strengths as well. Yeah.
And do you find that a lot of times people will say they're looking at those 4 areas, but actually they give a very simple view of maybe 2 of them, and put all their eggs in one basket, or 1 or 2 baskets, and put all their energies in those. They've got a tick in the box to say they've looked at it, but they're not really doing it in the right way, or in the way that's necessary to ensure that the change can get delivered.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on there, Tony. I think what happens in my experience is there is that cursory glance, but naturally people gravitate towards where their specialism is, where they know most, and quite often they gravitate towards the more logical side of things, so the process improvement. Sometimes the org structure, but there's always that shying away from anything which is, you know, remotely connected with emotion, and therefore the cultural and the harder leadership stuff can get forgotten or left behind. So you end up with a new set of processes which are out of kilter with the natural behaviours of the organisation, or the way in which it's led or structured. So you don't get the maximum benefit out of it.
I find that having a sponsor of an initiative that isn't running that part of the business, so they're not accountable for that part of the business, can be a massive benefit, because they can take a more independent view and keep pulling people back to look at those 4 areas consistently, because they've not really bought into, or they haven't got full ownership of the organisation that they're making the change to. So they can be slightly independent, and I know when I've worked on projects where that's happened, again, it keeps the project team on the straight and narrow.
Interesting. It is that argument, isn't there, to say if you're going to own the benefits, then you're going to take a more active view in the kind of delivery and of a change and how well it gets delivered. But I think your point of view is really interesting, and it kind of depends, I suppose, whether that sponsor has that more organizational mindset.
Yeah.
So doesn't have any particular tie to, and there's no internal competition, which you do get, my function's better than yours. If you haven't got that and that's removed, and they've genuinely got a real leadership organizational mindset, maybe real vision of what they're trying to do ultimately for the customer, or whatever that might be, I can see that would be fantastic, because they'd be not only removed from the outcomes, but potentially removed from some of the personalities, which we have to admit they do get in the way. Absolutely. Sometimes, and you can build a strong team of people that know one another, but you can also give yourself headaches we'll have all seen it, by putting the same people on the projects all the time, or they're great at solving problems, they're always our go-to person for the project. And what you end up with there is, potentially a lack of creativity, because that person is probably exhausted anyway. But even if they're not exhausted, you're not bringing new blood, you're not bringing new ideas, because there's a fear, because you kind of tend towards that safe pair of hands.
Absolutely. And the rest of the people within the business feel that the change is being done onto them, rather than getting involved, because it's the same people that's doing it all the time.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's a thread there, which is around organizations and thinking about change and continual change, and how that's going to set them up to do well in the future, is around investing in the talents of all the people. Not just those that are potentially sort of higher performers, but really investing in not just telling them they've got a new title, but giving them the support to do that role to the best of their ability, for them personally to get the most out of it, but for the organization to benefit the most from it. And I wonder, I had this conversation recently with someone, whether at some point soon those organizations that are not doing that will start to feel the pinch of talent going elsewhere. I do think that embedding change throughout the organization is a real opportunity on all levels, from an individual perspective, leadership perspective, but also, from an organizational benefit and future-proofing perspective. But investing in the talents of all the people and not the favorite few. I don't know. Maybe that's harsh. Maybe that's not happening.
But I think change is inevitable, and if you're not changing, you're dying effectively, aren't you? Because the rest of the marketplace is moving forward. So you've got to be nimble. You've got to be agile. So that sort of change approach, change mindset, change capability is, I believe, getting more and more important, for a more and more important skill for individuals to have. Whether or not organizations are recruiting at that for those skills at this stage remains to be seen. I'm not too sure. That they will recruit program managers or change managers, but day to day, are they looking at people who've got experience of changing ways of working, or changing the way that they do things in their personal life? I don't know whether that's a core competence that people are recruiting for, but I think moving forward, it will become a bigger, certainly more important skill set to have.
I think so, and I think it would be worth exploring that with recruiters, really, especially when the sort of market is as it is. And I think that's a really good point, because it's not necessarily going to be something that features potentially, on a supply chain manager's CV. I'm great at changing the process of change. Well, you know, is that something that you'd ask them to pull out? And is that something that employers would look for? But that whole, you know, your personal strengths in terms of, you know, your desire to continuously learn new stuff, your desire to collaborate potentially, your desire to create new advantages for the organization, those things could be very relevant in every job you recruit for. And at some point, and I'd really love that to be in the next 12 months, that gets to the top of a recruiter's list, because actually we've realized how valuable those skills have been during the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be fantastic? There's a great story that I've recounted a few times about an organization in Japan who, when you join them, what they do is they sort of account for you not being enrolled. I don't know whether it's 6 weeks or so after you first join, and rather than your sort of standard induction that we would all recognize when we join a new organization, what they do is they give you free reign of the organization for 6 weeks. And what they say is, what did your last company do better than us?
Right. Interesting.
And so they genuinely, you know, it's not a pre-formatted, meet this person on Friday, this person on Monday, this is your induction program. It's a, what can we learn from you? We haven't invited you into our organization to become, you know, so that we can mold you into our shape, which is often what happens. You know, you think yourself when you recruit, or will they fit the culture? Well, maybe it's a good idea for them not to fit the culture. And this organization did exactly that. God, Philip, it might have been 12 weeks actually, not 6. And it's free reign. What did your last company do better on you with your fresh pair of eyes where we were missing a trick? And you can imagine how much value must that add.
Yes.
If you've recruited well for someone with the right mindset to do that, and that's been, you know, on your agenda when you've been going through the recruitment process, the value coming out of that must be immense. And actually, it's not really cost them a huge amount, has it?
No, that's right. That's right. Because, you know, in reality, for the first sort of 6 to 12 weeks, people are not necessarily that productive anyway. And they're probably going to be a damn sight more productive because they'll have strong relationships with people that have been forged through the engagement that they have across the organisation. So, you know, like I say, there's probably very little downside, but significant upside for the organisation and the individual and the team.
Absolutely. I can't think of an organisation in the UK that does that, but maybe there are some of these more sort of, I don't know if you've read Lulu, but some of these more teal kind of organisations, maybe they do that. I don't know.
We should put the challenge out to the UK, and if any organisations are doing it, let us know, because it'd be great to get them on and talk about it.
Absolutely, that would be a brilliant conversation. Yeah, definitely, fantastic.
Brilliant. So, you know, one of the areas that we cover off quite a lot on these pods is, you know, as organisations are going through change and transformation, and as individuals are going through change and transformation, it can become very stressful for individuals, for teams, and for the organisation as a whole. And you know, especially over the last 12 months, we've all experienced completely different stresses. But what do you do to sort of look to alleviate that stress, and you know, what lessons have you learned that help you sort of overcome those day-to-day stresses?
Good question. I think in the main, when I'm actually in the thick of it, and somebody had to point this out to me because I didn't realise, I'm actually quite calm when I'm in the thick of it. And I think if you can look at it as, if you like, a problem to be solved, or a series of problems to be solved, and I'm a problem solver by nature. I'm a mathematician by background many years ago. But it is a process. It is looking at it as, we need to get to the root cause, find the real problem, do a bit of exploring, a bit of curiosity, and solve it. And I think that measured and logical approach helps to stay calm. And of course, if you're relatively calm and can see even just the next step, then then that, I think, would generally be the way that I would alleviate my stress. And I think it's something that's probably been honed over years, so I'm not that aware of it until someone had pointed it out to me. But I think that's what it is.
Right.
And I think the other thing about sort of managing that, potentially that feeling of being overwhelmed is, finding somewhere real belief that you're on the right path. That that we're going to get better at making the change, an everyday part of what we do, that we're going to get better at delivering it. And and I do genuinely believe that people want to do a good job, find them a legitimate connection to something, and they'll be engaged and motivated to make it happen. And I think it's that, again, which helps to reduce the stress. It's that belief, that focus on the future, that kind of calmly taking the one step at a time potentially helps to stop the stress building up.
Totally agree. And when you are, and become aware of it, when you are, have the awareness that you are getting stressed, and take action, and not just put your head in the sand and ignore it is a key. And have someone to turn to, I find, to chat things through, that's not involved, because, and it's not necessarily, in my experience, it's not necessarily for them to come up with a solution. It's by talking it through, you almost you go through the solution process yourself, don't you, in your head as you're talking it through.
You do. I've heard that called the teddy bear principle. Have you heard of that?
No, I've not. No.
Explain it to your teddy bear, and they won't answer you back, but you'll feel a lot better, and you'll probably work it out for yourself.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's that's not. I've never heard it say that, but I in the past I've been doing quite a lot of cycling, and some of the best conversations I've ever had is when I've been out on my own on a bike.
I can sympathise with that when I run. I run in all weathers sometimes, and sometimes there's nothing in my head, and sometimes everything's in my head. But inevitably, there's something pops out where you just think, "Oh yeah, that's the one. That's the takeaway from this run." Yeah,
which is a perfect segue into the final question, really.
Oh, okay.
And it is a takeaway. So if you could sort of pull all of your experience together, and you have one piece of advice, the takeaway for today, what would that be in terms of successfully delivering transformation?
I think that for me, the best thing you can do is to focus on an environment where the change is a positive experience for everyone. And the reason I say that is environment covers a multitude of things. But if it is a positive experience and people are engaged, then you really are not going to have to try too hard with your momentum. So focus on the environment. What is that environment? And I think from leaders, that need to tune into change in a different way, as we were saying earlier, for them, I think there's probably three things to create this environment. One would be to really optimize the performance of your team. So we've said this earlier, but understand what drives them, what builds their resilience, and how you can help them do that, and support them to really see them at their best. I think the second thing that the leaders can do is to really get under the skin of the vision. What are you asking people to do? Understand the changes that you're putting people through, the implications for the operation of your business, whatever that is, for tech and for performance. And so don't be surprised when performance dips. Really understand what you're putting people through and what to expect. And then I think the final part of a great environment is really about playing to the strengths and continually learn and treat the team like winners, so that you build that confidence and belief that you're going to get there. And then I suppose at the end of it, when you've got that environment, just get on with it.
And celebrate the successes.
Absolutely. We're all ready for a good old celebration, I think, aren't we?
I think we are.
just bring back the old let's have a party at the end of the project. There's a few have gone on Zoom. I've seen them on Zoom, and people are doing fantastic things to make the most of where we currently are.
Absolutely.
And to continue to celebrate successes. But it would be so nice if there was
if there wasn't a screen between everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. I think that's a perfect way to end this show. So once again, Linzi, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and really enjoyed the conversation.
My pleasure. I have too, and I've enjoyed the tangents we've gone off at. So it's been brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tony.
Brilliant.
Linzi, that was amazing. Thank you very much for your time, and really enjoyable conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you once again. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and leave some feedback. It's always good to get a sense of how people are feeling about the episodes. And if you have any questions for Linzi or myself, again, please include them in the comments or send us an email. And also take a look at the Transformation Leaders Hub. We've just upgraded to a new platform, which is really interactive and very really nice user interface. So if you haven't already, take a look at it. It's a great place to get to know and meet up with your peer group within change and transformation. So once again, thank you very much, Linzi, and I look forward to seeing you all again at the next episode, which is in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.